This is episode 78 of the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Meet an AARP Foundation legal advocate, question and answers.
The Nursing Home Abuse Podcast is dedicated to providing news and information for families whose loved ones have been injured in a nursing home. Here are your hosts, Georgia attorneys Rob Schenk and Will Smith.
Welcome. My name is Rob Schenk.
And I'm Will Smith.
Very informative episode for you today. We're going to be talking about the organization known as AARP, but more specifically AARP's legal division, getting out there in the courts. And to take us through that, we have a special guest, a fellow attorney. She's a senior attorney for the AARP Foundation, the legal department. Her name is Iris Gonzalez. Will, can you tell us a little bit about her?
Sure. So I had originally met Iris Gonzalez at the Consumer Voice Conference last year in 2017. She's actually the president of the governing board of Consumer Voice, and we've had people from Consumer Voice on before and explained that it is the national advocacy group for individuals in long-term care facilities. AARP, which is Ms. Gonzalez's 9-to-5 job, is the American Association of Retired Persons, which has a very similar mission, and there's a lot of synergy there between Consumer Voice and AARP. And Iris is a senior attorney at AARP Foundation Litigation, where she works on impact litigation and legal advocacy to protect the rights of vulnerable 50-plus citizens, those that are senior citizens, in matters that affect their health. The AARP Foundation litigation works to ensure that senior citizens have a voice in the courts. Her legal advocacy includes ensuring the availability of quality home and community-based long-term care services, ensuring quality in the institutional long-term care settings, and, which is very important, she's going to talk about, fighting to end the inappropriate use of psychotropic drugs on older people with dementia, and enforcing the substantive and procedural rights of those receiving long-term care and those receiving state or federally funded health care benefits. Before she joined AARP, though, Ms. Gonzalez was a complex commercial litigator at 2 international law firms. During her 10 years in private practice, she engaged in significant pro bono representations, including representative of plaintiff class action seeking integrated home and community-based mental health services. She served on the board of directors for the American Constitutional Society of Law and Policy and the Hispanic Bar Association of D.C. We are very excited to have her on the show today because in the legal world of protecting the rights of senior citizens, she is a heavy hitter.
All right, Iris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
So, Iris, I met you briefly at the Consumer Voice convention last, November or October?
Yes, November.
Okay. Right. And so I know that you are involved with that, but you're also largely involved with AARP, correct?
That's right. Well, I'm a senior attorney at AARP Foundation.
Sure.
The foundation, we work to ensure that we can end senior poverty. Basically, it's our vision, and we do that by helping vulnerable older adults build economic opportunity and social connectedness. Okay. As AARP's charitable affiliate, we serve AARP members and non-members alike. So bolstered by vigorous legal advocacy, the foundation sparks bold, innovative solutions that foster resilience and strengthen communities and ultimately and hopefully restore hope to the vulnerable older adults.
So what are some that's a very good 40,000 foot view of what they do. What are some specific, and you don't have to use people's names, but like what are specific things that AARP does to help the senior population?
Okay. Well, I can talk about AARP Foundation and our litigation efforts. I mean, there are a lot of programs on the programmatic side of the foundation side.
Sure.
That the foundation has AARP Foundation Tax Aid, AARP Foundation Back to Work 50 Plus. There are a number of programs to help people build, economic opportunity and resilience around securing the essentials. We in the litigation group at the foundation try to support that work, the gains made, or make sure that we don't roll back those gains through our litigation.
Okay, so that's
advocacy.
Right. So I guess that's kind of our next question is what type of cases does AARP litigate, and so that's question one. And the second question is, how do you select which cases to take on?
Right. So we protect the rights of older adults in the nation's courts all over the country, federal and state cases. We advocate to help older people, stay connected to their communities and to tear down barriers to economic and social stability. So we cover a broad range of issues, from fair housing and age discrimination to consumer fraud, employment benefits, pension rights, long-term care rights, civil rights, and more. Our primary mission is to ensure that older adults have a voice and proper representation in the legal system. So we participate in both litigation cases, directly representing clients and individuals in individual and class action cases, and also by filing amicus or friend of the court briefs. Right now, we have about 20 active cases in litigation, and we file lots of amicus briefs. But direct litigation cases, we have about 20 that are active right now, and those are in the areas of employment discrimination and benefits, housing and livable community, like fair housing claims, health and long-term care, and consumer protection.
Can you that's terrific. Can you kind of expound on what cases fall within the long-term care advocacy that you're doing? Of the 20 you mentioned, long-term care. Can you?
Yes.
What are those about?
Yes. Okay. So I can talk to you about like some of the active cases that we have right now.
Sure.
We have been litigating for the past, 7 years or so on the issue of the inappropriate use of antipsychotic drugs on people with dementia in nursing facilities. And so the first case that we had around this issue, and we're trying to really, prevent and deter this practice, it was in California, and it was a small class action. The class action was built around one nursing facility that had one medical director who wrote all the prescriptions and admitted in depositions that he never asked for consent. And with people with dementia, the consent may need to be obtained from someone who is a power of attorney or a healthcare proxy or some other legal representative. But the doctor in that case admitted that he never even sought consent because he just didn't think it was possible, and prescribed people with dementia antipsychotic drugs that were very harmful to them. And to our lead plaintiff in that case, the representative plaintiff, she ultimately died. She died within months of being put on the antipsychotic drugs, and she only went to this nursing facility for a temporary rehab after she broke her hip. So really
Iris,
people...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me jump in there. So for our listeners, why would the doctor prescribe psychotropic drugs,
or the nursing home use them?
Or the nursing home use them? Like what advantage does the nursing home gain from that?
Well, they prescribe these drugs to control behaviors that they determine or challenging for them. Mm-hmm. But what's important is that these behaviors they're sort of a normal symptom or part of the progression of dementia-related illnesses, because cognitively the person is declining and is unable to communicate or express his or her needs through words, right? So a lot of times people have unmet needs. They're in pain, they're thirsty, they're hungry, something bothers them, and they don't know how to communicate it, or they can't communicate it because of the cognitive effects of the disease. They can't communicate it except by, yelling or, or lashing out angrily when something is done that hurts them. And so then the nursing home staff is accustomed to saying, well, let's give them this antipsychotic medication to calm them down. And basically that just makes the person very lethargic and makes them sort of, like into a vegetable. They sit, they don't do anything, they don't engage in activities, they lose their thirst, their appetite, they're more likely to fall and hurt themselves. So really it's because they don't want to appropriately deal with these, I'm going to put it in quotes, behaviors. I'm going to say behavior is communication, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to delve deeper to find out, well, why is this person screaming? What do they need? And really try to deal with that, because that takes time. It takes more staff time, and it takes better trained staff. And there's really a problem of understaffing in nursing facilities and in other long-term care facilities. And the use of antipsychotic drugs is part of that problem. They chemically restrain people so that they don't have to provide the services that they should be providing.
So in your discovery in that case, in your research in litigating this case, and perhaps just as being a legal advocate in AARP, do you have an understanding as to the how widespread this problem is with using these drugs to sedate residents basically illegally?
Yeah. I have to say that there is debate about the frequency of use of antipsychotic drugs, and the reason for it is because CMS created the National Partnership to Improve Dementia Care back in 2014, I believe, to track the use of antipsychotic drugs, the off-label use. And what I mean by off-label is the use to treat conditions that were not approved by the FDA. So with antipsychotic drugs, the FDA specifically warned that they are dangerous and increase the risk of death if they are used for people over 65 years old with dementia. So that's what's called a black box warning, and it's called that because they put a black box around it to make it stand out, because it's very important. Mm-hmm. And so the FDA specifically states in that label, this is not approved to treat dementia-related psychoses. Mm-hmm. So then the way that CMS tracks inappropriate use is, has the antipsychotic been given to someone who doesn't have one of the illnesses for which is it approved? For example, schizophrenia. So they've been tracking that, and as of today, it is estimated that 1 in 6 nursing home residents are being given antipsychotic drugs inappropriately, meaning without a diagnosis of schizophrenia or some other serious illness for which the drugs are approved. But we believe the number is higher. And we think the number is higher because there is evidence that that nursing facilities, administrators, doctors, etc., are starting to include a diagnosis of schizophrenia, for example, in a person's file in order to justify giving the antipsychotic drug. But in all these instances, it's the first time that someone has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and schizophrenia's onset is in early adulthood. So it's highly unlikely that someone over 65 years old develops schizophrenia for the first time after 65.
Right. So the nursing home's just trying to make it easier to take care of this person to the detriment of this person's rights.
And dignity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that saying making it easier to take care of the person is too generous, because giving them the drug doesn't take care of them. Sure. It doesn't have any medical benefit to the person whatsoever.
Gotcha.
Iris, so with regard to this case or this particular class action, how did your office select this client and select this case?
Well, we establish and have longstanding relationships with advocates all over the country. And so what happens is when folks sort of notice that there's a problem that needs addressing, they'll reach out to us. And so we had, some friends in California who reached out to us. They're an advocacy organization, and our client, our clients went to them. So our client was the daughter of this lady who passed away. Went to them, and they reached out to us because they knew that that we really cared about the issue and wanted to do something about it. Subsequent to that case settled, and we were able to get a 2-year period of time where the facility was monitored by a court monitor, and they had an injunction detailing how they had to go about getting informed consent and detailing penalties if they failed to do it. We also got monetary relief for the class of plaintiffs or class of residents who were affected. So as a result of that case, we saw a decline not only in the use of antipsychotic drugs in that facility, but we also saw a decline in that county because other facilities were taking note of what had happened to that one. The AARP Bulletin wrote an article about that case and about the issue generally in July of 2014. And after that article was published, we got hundreds of calls from people all over the country, AARP members who said, this happened to my mom, this happened to my dad or my loved one. And so based on some of those calls, we were able to develop a couple more cases. And so we brought individual cases, one in Delaware and one in Tennessee. Both of those have been settled and concluded successfully, but we are still looking for cases to bring in other states because we really want to make a statement that this practice is unacceptable and that the culture of drugging people in nursing homes to silence them instead of really listening to and responding to their needs is just not acceptable, and it has to change.
We agree wholeheartedly.
That's how, sort of organically, people started calling us and telling us about this issue.
So when you take a case or when the AARP takes a case like this, Iris, is the goal similar to the result in the example that you provided in California where there was an injunction provided, or does the AARP actually seek compensatory damages on behalf of these clients?
We do both. So in some states, we have the ability to get injunctive relief and file, for example, a class action, where we can develop a case that will impact a broad number of people. That's what we prefer to do, and we will try to look for that. In some states, the law and the circumstances does not permit us to do that, but we proceed with the individual case anyway because we want to make a statement to deter that practice, and we also want to change the law, make good law in this area. Really, our cases are the only cases that have litigated this issue. So we want to really build a repository of good law on the inappropriate use of antipsychotic drugs as a chemical restraint and as illegal for various reasons.
Sure. Can you tell us in terms of, I know your division is doing the straight up litigation, particularly with these cases, but you mentioned that you file a ton of amicus briefs. Can you tell us what in what cases, how do you seek those out? What kind of cases are these where you're filing these? And actually for the listener, we're all lawyers here, but what is an amicus brief?
So an amicus brief is a friends of the court brief, and it is filed by someone or some organization that's not involved in the case directly, but feels that there is something important that they should share with the court about the issue to help the court make its decision. And so we file those friends of the court briefs. Frequently, we select cases and issues that we think are important in terms of preserving or establishing the rights of older persons in the courts, and on issues also that maybe at a first glance don't directly and only impact older people, but will affect the ability of older people to have access to the courts. So, for example, on issues regarding arbitration or class action or how standing is interpreted, or limitations on punitive damages or compensatory damages, those are issues that can affect everyone, not just older people, but we think that they're important so that everybody has access to the court to redress violations of their rights.
Does the AARP ever take on CMS directly for changes in regulations of long-term care facilities? Like, for example, you said arbitration. Was AARP involved, at least from an amicus standpoint, with regard to the changes recently with the arbitration agreements?
Yes. So AARP commented on the proposed rules that became the new conditions of participation for skilled and nursing facilities. And those comments, there were a lot of different things that we commented on, but they included whether arbitration clauses, pre-dispute arbitration clauses, should be permitted in nursing home admission agreements.
Mm-hmm.
And our position, AARP's position on was that they shouldn't be included, that arbitration clauses should be negotiated separately from an admission contract and should be negotiated when a dispute arises, right? So if there's a dispute, then you can decide, do you want to arbitrate it or do you want to deal with it in the court?
We 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, that's a topic.
And there's been a challenge to those rules, and we were involved as an amici, as a friend of the court, to give the perspective of why it is important, especially in the context of a contract that people enter, in which the person who's contracting has much less power, than the nursing facility. Is usually there in a time of crisis. Usually gets to a nursing facility without a whole lot of time for planning, and puts their entire life in the hands of the nursing facility, and has no idea what possible disputes could come up.
Right.
And those are some of the factors that we think makes these arbitration clauses wholly inappropriate for these, for nursing facility admission agreements. So yeah, those are the kinds of issues that we get involved with in terms of our amicus advocacy.
And Iris, with regard to you, what made you jump from a cushy big law job into fighting for our seniors?
Well, actually, when I was in big law, I was very involved in pro bono work. I did a lot of pro bono work. I found it to be a passion of mine to advocate for people who were vulnerable or didn't have the means to hire, a pricey lawyer.
Right.
And I worked for 5 years while I was at my former firm. I worked on a case that was a deinstitutionalization case. It was filed in the 70s, so I call it like an Olmstead case before Olmstead.
Right. Yeah.
It was during the time when people who were being warehoused in mental health facilities and not being offered home and community-based services. And it was one of the leading cases that started the deinstitutionalization movement. I came in as class counsel while I was working for this firm when we were implementing and monitoring one of many consent decrees because the jurisdiction, in this case DC, had still not complied after 35 years of litigation. So I just developed a passion for doing this kind of work.
Well, we are certainly happy that you are. I mean, we're talking about our most vulnerable, one of our most vulnerable populations in the country, and you're doing great work with the AARP. And let me ask this: 2 questions. Number one is, if there is a family out there that believes that their loved one is getting antipsychotics improperly, or maybe there's another issue, how do they get in contact with AARP's legal division, or you in particular?
Oh, they can contact me by sending me an email, and my email address is igonzalez@aarp.org, and so that's igonzalez@aarp.org. I would love to hear from folks, and also wanted to mention we also have a couple of other We've had a couple of other active cases in recent years dealing with long-term care. We've had a case in which we've challenged basically resident dumping, where nursing facilities feel that a particular residence is not as profitable as they'd like them to be when
Yes.
they're no longer on the Medicare reimbursement rate.
Yes.
They just dump them. The homeless shelters, to the streets, hotels. So we're very concerned about that practice. We also brought a case to help a person with serious communication disabilities have a camera installed in her room because we had concerns about abuse that she couldn't communicate. And there was legislation, though sadly our client died before we could get a resolution for her. That state has now passed legislation allowing for that. So we had an impact there. We also really care about the issue of assisted living facilities marketing their services in a deceptive way, saying that they're going to assess people's care needs and have plans that are tailored to their needs and charge them really high prices for doing it, and then charge them even higher prices as they reassess their needs and claim that their needs are higher, but actually not providing the services and indeed understaffing their facilities. So we're very interested in those issues and would like to hear from folks also if they've encountered those.
One final question. What about for any law students that are listening that might want to volunteer their time with the legal department over there? Like, is that something that you can work with them on? Because
yes, that is a fantastic question.
Yeah.
We hire summer interns every summer. We like to hire interns from all over the country, so we encourage people from all over the country to apply. We also hire recently graduated law students as law fellows, typically for a year after, and we have a process for selecting them, and they usually start in the fall. And they can go to the AARP careers page and see the listings for open positions for summer clerkships as well as law fellowship.
Fantastic,
Okay,
Iris.
excellent.
Well,
Yeah.
Iris, thank you for that information. Thank you for the work that you do and for appearing on the podcast.
And we will probably see you and the reason why I bring this up is that Iris was also, or is also still on the governing board of Consumer Voice, which is something that we've had in the past on the show. So hopefully we'll see you at the convention in November again.
That's right. Yes, I'm the president of the board, and I really enjoyed working with this organization because there's a lot of synergy between the types of issues that they care about and advocate for and what I do at my 9-to-5 job.
Absolutely.
There you go. Well, Iris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you later. The AARP, they do great work. Iris does great work. They're not cats, they're tigers.
I'm always extremely impressed with individuals that have spent so long to get a certain license, like an attorney or a doctor, and that devote themselves to the nonprofit sector. I mean, it's extremely valuable to those that they help, and it's extremely admirable because she has spent at the very least 7 years of her life just getting a law license to now serve the elder community, and that's very admirable.
That's right. And speaking of tigers,
yes, I wondered where that was going,
Yeah.
and that's a good segue. That
on July 29th is
July 29th.
International Tiger Day.
International Tiger,
International Tiger
not
Day.
domestic tigers.
Yeah, and I don't know what that. All I know is that that's written on this paper. So, actually, that leads me to something. Even though we got to go here in a second, but this podcast is the final result of a lot of work behind the scenes, and I wanted to give a quick shout out to everybody that's involved in that. Sarah DeMars,
Yes,
is our person in charge of getting guests, making sure the guests know, when we're calling them, the information that they're going to need to know, getting the bios from them, all that kind of stuff, and putting it into a easy to understand piece of paper that goes in front of Will and I. So she makes the process so much easier, and we thank her for that. Then there is Dennis, who takes the video and transcribes
it.
I don't know how he does it so quickly, but he does it. He does an excellent job. So so that's actually something that we leave out every episode. We should start putting it in. But there's 3 ways to consume the episode. You can watch it, listen to it, or read it. And you can read it because of what Dennis does.
That's right.
Third is Cody, who is our guy with the eye.
Yes.
How you would say. He does the editing work and puts the graphics on the video. And I guess last but not least is Gene, our producer.
Yes. Invaluable Gene is.
Mean Gene. At any rate, so we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please reach out to Iris if you're in any way a law student and interested in doing that work. And with that, we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Nothing said on this podcast, either by the hosts or the guests, should be construed as legal advice, nor is intended to create an attorney-client relationship between the hosts or their guests and the listener. New episodes are available every Monday on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app, as well as on YouTube and our website, nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. See you next time.